Okay, hey everybody. Welcome to another edition of Field of Dreams on ACTN. I'm Steve David and I'm your host. Today we will talk about special moments, special players that we have had that came through this country from whatever year. And my panel here is going to help us to do that, and let me take time to introduce them. I've got Alvin Anderson. Welcome to Set, Alvin.
Yes, as I said, this is second home to me now. I'm familiar with everything around.
Okay, next Alvin is Larry Joseph. Larry, welcome.
Thank you very much, Steve.
And Anthony Sherwood. Anthony, welcome.
Good to be here, Steve.
All right, and let me say hi to Shimon, Shimalicious. Shimalicious, I heard that you moved the Pizza Hut to another location, so instead of going by the community center, we go down, like we're going into La Brea, right after the bar, about 100 yards down on the left. So people around La Brea, go see Shimalicious. And we're going to introduce a new sauce. We call it the Pomerac sauce. Okay, guys. Did any of you guys had some of the Shimon pizza? You should.
I'm going to try it.
All right. Okay, let's talk about some special players and some special moments in Trinidad football. And, you know, people who inspired us and whatever. So let's start first with some signature moves. Can you guys remember any signature moves that hang on to be talked about today?
Well, let me start because I think I'll start with the older generation, something that we were talking a little bit about off air, and why I considered him perhaps to be the best dribbler that I've seen or played against, and I've been on the field with a lot of great dribblers, is Leroy DeLeon. And I started seeing this as a 14-year-old when Leroy was playing with Benedicts. And the first move I would talk about is what I call the peacock move. I've labeled it the peacock move because Leroy, when I looked at him first, he used to be standing on one leg and waving his foot above the ball with the other leg, inviting you to come and take a taste of the ball.
Right.
And that is the mistake that you made. You came in, and as you were about to touch the ball, he would move it. And then when you feel that you had him with the other foot, he'd push it back through your leg. So I call that the peacock move because he looked like a peacock standing up there. And the other move that he had was, I saw this not only in games, I saw that in practice when we all used to live in the Washington, D.C. area together. Mm-hmm. And I saw him do it to many people when we would go out in an afternoon, that he would run with the ball, and as you run with the ball, and as you're about to move the ball away from him because you thought he had exposed the ball to you, he'd stand up on the ball. And as you hook the ball with your foot, the ball is moving nowhere, and you'd fall flat on your face.
Right.
And I think even people tell me he once did it to Sedley Joseph down here. I would be surprised if Sedley went flat on his face because I'd never seen Sedley fall yet. So Leroy DeLeon with his signature moves, the peacock as I called it, and I don't know what that standing up on the ball was because I've never seen any other player in my life with do that same move. So I have to call it the DeLeon move.
Let me tell you, Leroy developed his skills. He used to get a ball and have about 10 or 20 kids, and just in the middle of all of them and just trying to keep the ball away from them, pulling, dribbling. And when they get him, he would put his foot on it, they kick and they fall over, and then he go again. That's Leroy. So you're right. He has a lot of moves, but spent a lot of time working on those. Larry, who you remember?
Well, in my days, of course, Philbert Jones come to mind because he was my era. Just before him, I went looking at Trinidad play, and this forward we had called Bert Neptune. I mean, I saw this guy do some things that up to today, he's passed now. I mean, I can't describe how he was able to come out from between some defenders facing the corner flag, you know. See, he would just plat his leg and he would leave defenders for dead.
Right.
And you would just see him come out of that tight space and leave these defenders staying at absolutely nothing, and he would go with the ball, and I mean, people would be like, what just happened there? Berta was a fantastic dribbler,
Right.
and he was really tight with his control and everything. And I thought that for me, he was one of the better carriers of the ball, and he left an indelible mark in my mind. I mean, I wasn't really a striker after I left college, but he was one of the guys that I was hoping to be able to dribble like after seeing him.
Right.
Coming back to Filbert Jones had a cutback. He would be going down the left side at full speed, and with the same speed, cut back with his right foot across the defender.
Right.
And of course, if you try to stop same time with him, that would be the end of you.
Right.
And I mean, I have tried patterning it somewhat, but Filbert was an expert at that cutback at full speed.
Well, you got pretty good at that because I saw you do that in a couple over 35 games that I saw you in. That little cutback.
Please underline the age group, eh? Underline the age group.
You as well, Anthony. I saw you do the same thing.
I come close to Larry with some of this stuff, Steve.
Hey.
Now, before Tony goes, I mean, and then of course Tony came after us. But I mean, Tony, it's just unfortunate that because of injury, Tony wasn't able to grace for a longer period. But at his competitive days, Tony was absolutely fantastic. Right. I mean, he used to tear defenders apart. Left side, right side. Tony could go anywhere. I mean, there wasn't a favorite spot for him.
Right.
And if you look at some of the tapes now in playing days, both for Prayers and for Trinidad at youth level, Tony was fantastic. I'm just sorry that we weren't able to see more of him. But Tony definitely would be one of those people with signature moves. Tony could hit you a spanner, he could hit you, he could a crossover, he could dummy you. Tony had a few moves up his sleeves that, trust me, a lot of defenders could testify to.
So, Tony, you want to talk about this or you want to talk about
Well,
somebody
first
else?
of all, I want to make sure I have my $20 for Larry, But in terms...
That's all.
I might
I
have
was
to up
hoping
it
for a
a
little
bit.
more.
It's always worth.
But I would say in terms of iconic moves, and this is not a player that I had the good fortune to really see that much of, but it would have to be Leroy Span and the Spanner. I mean, that's one of those moves here locally that every kid that I know wants to master. And there are some guys who had a deadly spanner, but the fact that this Leroy Span actually had a move, such an iconic move named after him, is amazing to me.
Yeah, right.
I'll give you a joke about Spanner. I remember I just gotten called to the national team at 19 years old. So went to the national stadium to train. You're meeting all these legends, Spanner and these guys, and we were playing a scrimmage. And Spanner was on my team. And I got a ball and didn't pass it to him. He called for it and I didn't pass it to him. And when that particular session was over, he came up to me. He said, "Young boy, you know who I am?" He said, "When I call you for the ball, just give it to me." Just so he told me, And I was like, I'm a little teenager just getting into the national team, and I mean, he's an icon. So he kind of intimidated me at that. Fortunately, we became friends after that. He came over to Trin Talk at the tail end of his career, and we became really, really good friends. And it's one of the persons that I admired, as even at that age, he was still able to perform at a fairly high level.
And you give him every ball after that. But
If I wanted to make the team.
I would not thought that because Spanner was very quiet. I know Spanner to be very quiet, don't say nothing. Maybe because
I was
he
taken
still young
aback. I was taken
And
aback.
very similarly, he one of the hardest trainers I'd ever seen in my life. People who go out to train. And his signature move, as Tony said, it was because of persistent training. I remember going on tour with the national team. I was still reasonably young enough to still kick a football. I'm going at the national team as the team doctor. And 6 o'clock every morning, 6 a.m. without fail, Leroy is with a ball heading out. The two men that I will always think of, always, no matter where we were, what happened, Leroy Span and Michael Maurice, they got up early to either run or to train. And I was one of those who, accustomed getting up early, went out with them. And I remember Leroy practicing his moves at 6 a.m. No wonder he had the moves that he had. And no wonder Mike became the great goalkeeper that he had.
And you're absolutely about Mike, man. I mean, Michael Maurice, Brow was, I remember when we in camp, Brow was a teenager, and he would come there. And like myself, we would stay outside and after practice was finished, just shooting on him and stuff. And he in the mud, little skinny little thing. Brow was so skinny as a teenager, and little skinny little thing in the mud. You could only see eyes because everything else is mud. But he was determined. You knew he was going to make it.
Bro,
It's a shame, Steve. I mean, one of the things that we always talk about is the fact that you had all of these iconic players, from a while back, if you will, and we just don't have the kind of footage you would love to see of these guys, So when I hear Alvin talk about, Leroy Span, I grew up hearing stories about Leroy Span and everybody in Point Fortin, essentially. Those were the icons.
Right.
And there's just, there's nothing you could reference to see, how these guys play the game and the dribbling ability and the intelligence and everything else they do. It really is a shame. I mean, it's terrible we don't have that type of footage available.
I am not someone to advertise for John Williams, as people think. I'm not someone but I have now been coerced to come on a committee to do just that.
Yeah.
We have a committee now that is going to put people into the Hall of Fame, their own football Hall of Fame, instead of the Sports Hall of Fame, and also to have both in cyberspace and at the Home for Football, an area where youngsters could come up and see memorabilia from the greats.
Right.
So Steve, save your jerseys. You can save your jerseys, Larry. Save your jerseys that you played in. Make sure they're not thrown out with the wash. Yeah, so save your jerseys. So we're hoping to put memorabilia and especially footage on film, little podcasts that people can see of some of the greats of our era. From our era going up. The film is there. It's just somebody has to go and look for it and whatnot.
Right.
Recently, Lincoln was able to get a film of our own 1970 NCAA championship and 74 NCAA championship.
Okay.
It was done by a group of fellas who were doing a film from ESPN. So things are there.
Yeah.
You just have to go and look for them.
Yeah, and just to divert a little bit, sorry, Steve, in terms of what Tony was saying, that there's no footage. One of the things that I have always admired growing up is sitting or standing or being in the company of some of these older players and just listen to them talk about their playing days and players who they admired and that. I mean, I could do that for days on end. I am not bored at all listening to these guys.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, the most important thing I say when you have a group like that, make sure you have an objective person there who can tell you if it's really true or not. Because I always say there are three sides to a story.
Yours, mine, and the truth.
Yours, mine, and the truth.
I don't mind being fooled.
So when there's an objective person there, some of the moves that, or some of the people who have playing days that seem too good to be true, generally they might have been too good to
Well,
be
it's
true.
strange that you would say that. I remember having a conversation with Alvin Cornell an evening, and I was surprised to hear him say that the best forward he'd ever seen played for Trinidad was the gentleman on our right.
Well, he isn't far wrong because two groups of people picked him in that group. But one of the people, Alvin himself, was, in my opinion, close to Archie, I felt, but I gave Alvin the edge because I had seen a lot of Alvin.
Right.
Perhaps a lot of Archie too, but Alvin Cornell, to me, was the greatest left-sided player I've seen Trinidad have. Archie, who I played against many times, too many to be true, and he stunned us every time. Archibald was perhaps a shade below him, but two greats of two different eras.
But what
And
made
it'd be
him- what
hard
made
to
him so
split.
special,
Alvin
Doc?
Cornell had the ability to do with his left foot anything. He could, and especially he was more Brazilian-like than any other Trinidad player, in my opinion.
Wow.
Because Alvin Cornell, many Trinidadians, we grew up hitting the ball as the English people taught us, very flat, very straight, and not with inside or the
bend.
outside of the foot.
Right.
Alvin Cornell, I don't know if it's because of his travels he traveled to England very early with the West Indies football team. And Alvin played for Trinidad at a very young age. And the exposure, he used to do almost anything with that left foot. In addition, he had an outstanding shot with his left foot, very hard, and could kick with his right foot.
Right.
So he was a dribbler, he was a free kick specialist, but I especially love the way you'll hear people say now, oh, look at the shape of that cross coming in. Alvin Cornell was putting shape on crosses before that was
A term.
a term. He was putting shape on crosses. And even into a late age, Alvin Cornell was playing even into his 70s, even into, the 70s, where he was already in his mid-40s or 50s.
Yes. Funny you should say
Alvin
that,
was
but I
special.
heard a guy from the States was telling me a couple of years ago that we were just talking football, and it's one of those areas where Alvin and Anton does camps. And the guy was saying that when they're playing the little pickup game, he said, man, if you see Alvin,
Yeah.
this 60-year-old guy playing amongst our youngsters and teaching us a thing or two, you know, he was amazed that Alvin still had the ability to control the ball quickly and pass it at his age and not look
Sure.
between those youngsters.
Yeah.
You know.
We have to take a break, but we come back with Alvin because there's a lot more to talk about Alvin. Viewers, we'll be right back after the short break.
There would be a few of those well-known players looking on at the game. And yes, like any youngster coming up, you would want to impress because, I mean, that's what it was about at the time. But I think the fact that the standard was at such a level that
We are inspired. We are practiced. We learn. We have challenges. We are supported. We persevere. And we shine. This is our commitment to you.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Come on. Don't believe me, just watch.
Okay, welcome back, viewers. Hey, guys, like you guys are talking about Alvin, and I seen Alvin as well. Special.
Make sure you mention Alvin Cornell because others might be saying Alvin. Alvin was an ordinary player. Make sure you mention Alvin Cornell.
might,
Yeah, Alvin
I might have to take
Cornwell,
what, might take on my 20 that I get from Tony and Steve.
No, but really, and I when I came to Port Spain to play with police, and Alvin was a shock late 30s, early or so. Special, man. I used to look at him just like you guys say, with my eyes open wide. But I also had another player that I love, and I would say I patterned my game after, would be Bobby Sukram. I don't know if you guys ever seen him play.
Yeah, heard about him, but never
Yeah, I
saw
only
him,
heard
obviously.
about Bobby. Bobby and I became friends afterwards. And he also was one of the forwards that Alvin told me
Right.
did not play enough time for Trinidad for the talent that he had. But Alvin acknowledged that Bobby was one of the best strikers he had seen.
Bobby
You know.
Sukram, I would say, was the brainiest striker that we had in that period of time,
Yeah.
from mid-60s on. He used the talent that he had to the maximum, to the extreme. And one of the things, you're talking about moves that Bobby Sukram had, I will tell you one, because I saw him do it to Lincoln Phillips time and time again when they played against each other. North-Souths, and then when Maple played against the regiment. Lincoln had this move, which you're talking about, signature move. He caught many people with it, where he would fake, in somebody coming in a one-on-one, he'd fake as if he's going to his left,
And then
and the striker would put it back right, obviously because Lincoln is moving left. And Lincoln would save the ball, and everybody would say, oh God, Lincoln dive back in here. He dived back in here. But that was Lincoln's move to dive back. But Bobby Sukram, knowing Lincoln, he would, as Lincoln fake and went back this way, he would put the ball right by Lincoln's foot. And with your body, Lincoln's body weight going this way, the ball would trickle inside the goal. And I've seen Bobby Sukram do that not only to Lincoln Phillips, I've seen him do it to other goalkeepers. He had the uncanny ability in 1v1 situations to just push the ball when you
Your
are balanced,
weight,
your
yeah,
weight
is
and your balance is in one direction, and the ball would seem like it's not going very hard and go inside the goal. And the other move that I have seen Bobby Sukram and adopted afterwards from him was the toe punch.
Right.
We don't see forward scoring with toe punches anymore. Part of the reason, I think, is because the nature of the boot. But we had a boot when we were growing up in those years, and I'm dating myself. It was called a Albert Charles boot thing with a big cap on the front. That was my first exposure to a boot when it came out of the barefoot situation. And that was ideally suited to toe punch.
Right.
But after that, new boots weren't as suited. But players of quality, forwards of quality, all had. And I saw Steve score a toe punch against us when he was playing with the Miami Toros. We thought we had him trapped, and you stick,
stick
without
it to
any ability
backlift.
to have any backlift. You stick your toe on it,
Right.
and you catch the defender, you
Goalkeeper,
catch goalkeeper, everything.
yeah.
So Bobby Sukram,
You
I
know
saw
time
with
to
that
set.
move as a youngster. I picked it up, and toe punch I carried throughout my career, and it helped me with a number of goals.
So you toe punched a few goals, Doc?
even at Fed match level.
But there's people that we see and we admire. And I remember playing when I played. But if Bobby Sukram is in the stand, oh Lord, I've got to make sure
Yeah.
that I give him a show. And sometimes he came to games and I didn't even know he was there. And after the game, I'm like, damn. But of course,
Yeah.
you put your show on, but you thought, man, maybe I could do better. But Bobby with a little umbrella come through the rain. And I used to look for the older players, and when they come to the game, so I can impress.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I hope the kids in there do that, because if I see a Bobby Sukram in the stand, or Alvin Cornyn in the stand, or whoever,
Yeah.
Kevin Barassa, I got to put on a show.
Well, I think that's the difference back in your days and
Yeah.
somewhat in my time, in that we had so much quality players around
Right.
that whatever field you were playing on, chances are there would be a few of those well-known players looking on at the game. And yes, like any youngster coming up, you would want to impress, because, I mean, that's what it was about at the time. But I think the fact that the standard was at such a level that it kind of fed into those on the generation behind and sort of gave them an incentive to want to do as well or even exceed some of those players in our minds who we consider to be the icons and the legends. I think there may be an absence of that now in the modern player because they probably looking at foreign legends to be their role models. And of course they see that on a screen, which doesn't capture the real essence of a person because it depends on what the camera is panning. You know, it's different sitting in the stands and looking on television.
But what about you guys' days? Did you ever look up to the guys? coming
Yeah, I mean,
into-
I don't think you could have a discussion, Steve, without talking about Russell Atapi. Probably one of the best players that I've ever seen with a football at his foot. And I mean, I think with Russell, you know, everybody tends to have maybe like a signature move, something they go to when they're in tight spaces. Russell just seemed to instinctually be able to pull things off, you know. And
Yeah.
I mean, I remember sitting there in training sometimes down at the Acre, you know, with the strike squad. And I would just sit there and watch him at times, you know, because it just seems like he had this innate ability to just do things every day seemingly that we've never seen before, you know. Dwight obviously would have been part of my little era when I was growing up as an under 14. And it's interesting because Dwight's game really evolved. When he was younger, he was, you know, they would call him Duflay in Tobago. You know, that was like his nickname. And it was interesting to see how he went from being a guy who was just very flashy, you know, tremendous dribbler, an entertainer, to being more of a functional type player when he went to England.
Yeah.
You know, I think people in Trinidad who actually had a little bit of an issue with him sometimes when he came back because we felt like he wasn't doing as much
Like
as
they
we
used
would
to
have
see.
wanted to see. But as he would explain, his role now as a professional with Aston Villa at the time is to operate in and around the
18
box,
yard
you know.
box,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's not, you know, he's no longer this guy who assesses his game based on how many guys he's destroyed in a game per se. It's about making the right runs and being on the end of good crosses and so forth, you know. But those are two guys for sure.
But that's
Steve.
so true because I remember when I played with Police, like I said, I think I said before, if I'm not getting ball from the midfield, I go back and get my ball. And in the Police, I did that. I went back, I get it. We had no midfield who was very creative. So I would be the one that doing all the dribbling and stuff and playing. And then when I turned pro and I went out, Steve, you don't need to do that. I need you up front, one touch it into the goal. So my whole game changed.
Yeah.
I forgot about dribbling and just operate by the box.
Russell Latterby, Doc, and you'll jump in after me. I mean, in my era, Russell Latterby, without a doubt, was and still is the greatest player of my era. I mean,
Latterby?
I mean, I saw him at under 14, was very blessed. He came across the Trinidad to play with us, so I was able to play alongside this legend. And I mean, you would actually be on the field. I would be on the field and sometimes catch myself standing and looking at him as if I'm a spectator. Because the guy is he was a genius. I mean, I remember we were in Guyana, the national team. We were going to play a World Cup qualifier, and Russell and I was just in the patio, and we had a ball, and he was saying, "Larry, let me just knock it around," you know. And we would say, "Okay, let me see who could score on one another the most." You know, you had to hit the wall behind each person. And I mean, Russell, without any
Effort.
any effort, you know, and I considered myself an adequate player, you know what I mean? And Russell would embarrass me, you know. But that guy, I mean, when we go to play CONCACAF club games, any country with Lani, the first thing people would come out people's mouth in the airport. A lot of people told you, a lot of people, the referees knew him by his first name. That used to tell you how famous this guy was. I mean, the game would be going on, the referee would be talking to Russell. I saw that, you know. Russell was unbelievable. For me, I mean, I still consider it an honor to have been on the same field with Russell.
Right.
With the type of ability Russell had. I mean, this type of guys come along once every 100 years for me.
And I say to myself, Russell Latterby, because I saw him throughout his career with the national team. And if he would only be flexible and train hard, he never used to train that hard. And I say, but if this fella would train hard,
Right.
he'll be the greatest of all time.
Right.
Because Russell seems sometimes to want to always get away from, physical
physical
training,
side of the
the
thing.
physical side of the training, because he loved the playing with the ball. One of the things you talked about Dwight York and what he became, somebody only has to look at, and I recently looked at it, and I tell the viewers, look at there's on YouTube the 66 goals that he scored for Manchester United.
Yeah.
And then nobody will have a doubt as the many facets of
Yeah.
Dwight York, the striker. He was a great. Dwight York was a great.
He was.
Now, another person who transformed, and I saw him transform, was, and we haven't spoken about him much in the forum here, is David Nakid. Because I saw a lot of David Nakid at school, my own brother Barry was at school with David Nakid and Dexter Skeen, and they had a very good team. David Nakid at school was an excellent dribbler, always holding on to the ball and whatnot. Reminded me in our school days of my friend Ian Bain, who I eventually had to try and get to
Ian
hand up the
Bain,
ball,
yes.
hand up the ball.
That's begging you to handle it.
hand off at least some. But Nakid was very similarly, and Dexter Skeen would be making runs left, right, and center, while David Nakid would be holding on to the ball, dribbling people and whatnot, and then asking for, typical David Nakid, asking for a claim after he came off the field, and I would be saying, but what have you done? And as he became a professional, he became more like a Valderrama. One
Yeah.
touch, two touch, pick up the ball,
That's
go
what I
into
remember
space.
of him.
And I don't know if David ever patterned himself after Valderrama, but the two are very similar. He became a midfield player with hardly any touches.
Yeah.
And then he convinced me that he could kick the ball finally when he sent me a video from Switzerland where he scored a goal in the snow from outside the box. But he couldn't kick the ball adequately when he was at St. Mary's.
Right,
But
right.
later on in his years,
learned.
so
Yeah.
there are things that you can learn even
Of course.
as you progress as a player with practice and improvement in not only your technique, but improvement in how you see the game and approach the game. And he was somebody who, to me, transformed into an excellent midfielder, one and two touch midfielder. As I said, Valderrama from Colombia was the person that I think he may have patterned himself.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Doc, because I remember in my initial years, everybody used to stick me up in the forward line for whatever reason. I mean, even when in the colleges league, I remember winning most goals in 82 in the college league. But as soon as I got out of school, I always thought I was a midfielder.
Right.
So as soon as I got out of school, the next team I went to, I told them I'm a midfielder. I didn't want to be up there taking all them hard kick and cuff from them big strong defenders, you know what I mean? Yeah, so the people can adapt the games. Sometimes coaches
Yes.
see it in the player and know, okay, this is not your best position. You would make it better this rather than that. And there are some players who we could point to who have started off in one position but ended up in a position where they made themselves a good reputation. And I could attest to that personally.
Let's talk about my good friend Warren Archibald. I don't know if you guys seen him, how much you guys seen about Warren, but you guys need to, because Warren was to me, he would get the ball in the midfield, and whoever playing right back, they're going for a run, regardless, they're going for a run, and he would do that time after time after time. After he get to the ball line, he knock it across, he would come back jogging up to the midfield again, and he pick up the ball again. We're going for another run. That was Warren.
That's my only regret.
You've seen him probably a
Yeah,
lot.
I've seen him, I said, too many times. And Benedict used to play with a strange system when we came up against them. Steve, because of his broken leg, wasn't there, and he always says we won the Intercol in '68 because he wasn't there. But Benedict always had an outstanding forward, but they always had outstanding wingers. If it was not Warren Archibald and
Dick
it was
Furlong.
and Dick Furlong,
Yeah.
it was then Clifford Leonard and Leo
Right,
Brewster.
right.
And what they did was they stuck these two wingers up there, and it kept your wing backs honest.
Yeah.
And the center forward was there, Steve initially, before he broke his leg, and then others after, where Warren Archibald would beat everybody for speed. And he had two moves that gave us trouble. He come along the byline and either hit the goal or square back the ball, and the other move was the move that you talked about, that he'd run the defender down the byline. He'd cut across the box, and I saw him do this to Lincoln later on. I'd warned Lincoln before. I said, Lincoln, remember Archie coming across the box, but he hooking it back. He said, yeah, Alvin, yeah. I said, remember he hooking it back. And Archibald came across the box. We were playing in Miami. He came across the box. And so said, so done. He hooked it back in the far corner with his right foot, because people used to feel that his right foot was much weaker.
Right.
But he had both. He had both. But he liked to go down the left, cut across, come along the byline, and hit with the outside of his foot. Cost for the many Benedict's forwards. Wilfred Cave. Wilfred Cave made a living on Archibald's feasting. Both at Benedict's and at the national team.
I wanted, when we come back, let's talk about, when talking about a group of players, and I'm talking about you're in one city, Point Fortin, and there's a group of players that's good. And when you go out to play in the evening, you better bring your game, otherwise Wilfred
Somebody will
Cave
take
is
a
going to get you off the field. And get somebody else in. Let's talk about that when we get back. Viewers, we'll be right back after the short break.
Some guys who are from less than 1 mile apart. All of them living from 1 mile apart in Point Fortin. I don't think that will ever be repeated.
I don't think so.
And it has not been repeated. Point Fortin has tried to repeat it, and it's never been repeated.
We are inspired. We are practiced. We learn. We have challenges. We are supported. We persevere. And we shine. This is our commitment to you.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Saturday night and we in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Come on. Don't believe me, just watch.
Okay, welcome back, viewers. Hey guys, before the break, I was telling you guys, when talking about a group, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was in the water, but everybody at one time and point was so special. We had Dick Furlong, Wilfred Cave, Monty Douglas, Keith Douglas, Tony Douglas, Leo Brewster, Warren Archibald, Leroy DeLeon, a whole bunch, and everybody was so good. And I remember one guy came from San Fernando, I can't remember his name, to play with in point. And then sometime after about 5 minutes, Wilfred said, hey, we don't play that here. You gotta go bring somebody else on. So it's intimidating.
Yeah.
I mean, and we all kind of, it was a fan of each other. It was never like a jealousy. Everybody could play,
Yeah.
and they have something special about their game
Yeah.
that we all enjoy.
Yeah.
I would sit back and on the field and sit back and watch Leroy go to work, or Archie run down the line, or Wilfred score a goal and Wilfred Cave could score goals.
Right.
So it was very, very special. You guys have any stories with any other location that you?
Well, I would have to draw my time with the Trinidad team
Uh-huh.
because we were considered at the time a star-studded team. We had like about 8 or 9, sometimes 12 national players on the team. You know, while Russell was there, we had people like Marvin, well, Clayton Morris, Brian
Right.
Williams, Phil Budjo, Adrian Funrose. I mean, our team was stacked. Right? And like you said, I mean, we all complimented each other on the field. There was nothing like any petty jealousies with us
Right.
whatsoever. Even in the training session, we drove each other on to be better players.
Right.
And so when the time came for game, you know, we had our personal pride. That when you lumped it together during the course of a game, we just wanted the Trinidad brand to come out on top. And so we usually would have some really favorable results because we all played to our strengths and try to lend support to everybody else in their own particular area of the field. So, I mean, my time with Trinidad, I could say was a real enjoyable time, both in terms of results and the camaraderie that we had.
But Larry, the difference there is that group of guys that you're talking about were put together by deceased Richard Braffett,
Yeah.
who we all respected and,
course.
and cherished. Richard put, and they were from, like you mentioned, Latterby and Foston, Northerners. But Steve is talking about some guys who are from less than 1 mile apart. All of them living from 1 mile apart in Point Forte. I don't think that will ever be repeated.
I don't think
I
so.
don't, and it has not been repeated.
Yeah.
Point Fortin has tried to repeat it, and they've never been repeated. Because if in generally, if you look at where people are from national teams in Trinidad and Tobago,
Yeah, they're all over.
they're from
Yeah.
all over.
Yes.
Right, all over. But Point Forte, and you could not, say it wasn't justified. All those people that he talked about justified their playing field, their position on the field. One of the things I had to say is I saw a picture of Shell Coates, and you might have to develop this for me, because the coach of the Shell Coates team was a former national himself, who was a midfielder for Trinidad and
Doyle
Tobago.
Griffith?
Doyle Griffith. And I have a sneaky feeling that Shell Coates
That
team
was it?
with Doyle Griffith
That was it.
was the beginning and the reason for all these young players coming to fruition. So, Tony, you're a coach, a young coach. There are times when a coach influencing a group of young people in his area can bring a group of young fellas all the way up to quality
That was it. Yes.
Yeah.
that national teams were selecting them on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
And we have to give the coach, I think, of that Shell Coates team
Oh yeah.
a lot of credit.
I think that era, in that Point Fortin scenario, we had to look at it now almost like a freak of nature because, as you said, it has not been replicated or duplicated since then. Much to the dismay of the Point Fortin people now, because they grew up and were spoiled by having so many great players at one time. You know, it's like us reminiscing about the Great West Indies team back in the day, you know. There's a reality that hits you now that what we have in front of us now is a pale comparison to those guys. But I agree with you, Doc. And I mean, when you hear, I mean, I hardly saw most of those guys in their competitive days. I
Right.
only saw one in the latter days. And of course, you could see the greatness in them still. You know, and in my mind as a young player, I mean, I consider it as a loss to me that I didn't actually see you guys live. But I still do enjoy, like Alvin is talking about you guys, and I'm getting
Goosebumps.
goosebumps.
Yeah.
Right.
Because wherever I go, whether east, west, north, or south, people speak the same way about you guys in those areas. I mean, it is across the board in terms of the level of respect and awe that football lovers had for that generation of players. As I was telling the story of air, in Miami one time and took a taxi to go downtown, and the taxi driver was a Haitian, and I think it was me and somebody else, and he heard us talking, so he asked us, where we from? So we from Trinidad. He said, you guys know Archie Bull. And we say, yeah, we know Archie. He said, the man is a god, man. In Haiti, the man is a god. You know, and I mean, you hear these little snippets, and in your mind you're thinking, my God, these guys and them had to be larger than life. You know what I mean? And makes you feel good to know you're a trainer then with these guys.
And that came about from Archie had 2 visits to Haiti. Before he went with you all in 73.
Right.
He also went to Haiti earlier with the national team.
Score 3.
And he had an outstanding game in Haiti earlier than Steve, when Steve and the national team went in 73. So the Haitians were expecting him when he came back in 73, when Trinidad were in the qualifiers then. And Trinidad lost out to Haiti, World Cup place to Haiti under
dubious circumstances.
But we won't go over that at this time.
No.
Let me tell you something like you guys don't know as well. When we were playing growing up with Wilfred and all that, if everybody is doing well, that is a quiet field. They only yell when you're not doing well. They yell at you. And when I turned pro, it was exactly the opposite. When I turned pro, if I'm not doing well, you don't hear them. They know that you're having a bad day and they're trying to pick you up maybe. But anytime you make a good pass, good ball, Steve, good day, you're hearing the talking. Down in point. You can make how much good ball you want. You're hearing that. You're supposed to do that.
Yeah, that's your job.
Yes?
Yeah, that's
And
expected.
then,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
expected.
yeah,
And when you do something bad, especially Wilfred K, oh Lord, he has the biggest mouth in all that. Yeah. Tony, who inspired you? What players you looked up to or gave you that inspiration to
I
do
don't
what you
even
did?
need to think about that one, Steve, to be honest. I mean, unequivocally for me, it would be Russell. You know, for a guy who was part of my generation, I remember fashioning almost every aspect of my game after Latter P, in terms of the way he moved his body,
Right.
his positioning of his hands, the various things he would attempt to do on the field. He was really just for many of us, just that guy that we wanted to emulate.
What about you, Larry? Who inspired you? Who you would give credit to as the? Oh man,
Well,
he helped me
I'm
out.
afraid to say this because the person that I really appreciated as a player was not a trainer then. Well, was the Brazilian player Zico. In my days, I really admired his game. I didn't try to fashion my game after him, but he was the player that I admired. Locally, I always wanted to be my own player, actually. I didn't really want to pattern my playing style after anybody. This is not a negative, but in coming up, we all grew up unhindered in how we played our games, in the road, in the streets, and the pickup. And I became a product of that. And it started to work for me from an early age. People started to see me and admire how I play. I decided I'll just stay with it.
You didn't take a piece of anybody's game?
Locally, no.
Locally?
I didn't take a piece
What
of
about
it.
you, Alvin?
There are 2 people I'd like to bring up, and both of them were former Malvern players. Surprisingly, I wasn't a Malvern supporter. But because I lived in St. Joseph and I used to go down early teenage years down to either UE Savannah or St. Joseph Savannah. In St. Joseph Savannah, when I went down there, I went out 6 o'clock in the morning, and before I reached, Ken Hodges there, a player who played for Malvern and for Trinidad and Tobago, and he's doing keep-ups with the ball and doing things with the ball. And I said, if he could do that, and he's already a national player and whatnot, who am I? So he gave me not only the will to try and improve, but the will to try, the drive to try and be the best that you can be. But one of the things that I always remember, and my sisters and my mother remember this the most, is that I always used to try to volley like Buggy Higgs. I broke a lot of windows. I broke a lot of windows in the house as a result. And I was saying, I'd kick one over bars for St. Mary's, and I'd say, oh gosh, why couldn't I do it like Buggy? and trying to get over the ball, and 3 windows go. And my mother would just say, wait till your father gets home.
Yeah.
So Buggy Haynes, who was a wonderful forward who for Trinidad and Tobago, didn't like to train, but he was just ahead of me in the years. But he was an excellent player, instinctive player, good finisher, and a very good volleyer of the ball.
Speaking about training, I always told Ron Lafferty, and I want you guys to tell me who you have in mind. I always told Ron Lafferty, Ron, if you would train a little harder, there's nothing, there was nobody in this island could be better than you, because he had all the talent and all the tools to be a great player, but he just don't like to work. I know that was when he came to the States. He lived with me for a little while. Unbelievable talent.
Yeah.
So who is that player for you guys? That person who did not develop to the point that they should have.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
under
but-
the don't like to train label, I mean, Russell's name would come up, but I mean,
But he developed.
well, Russell didn't develop. Russell
Could
is
be
one of
much
those. Russell comes under the heading of special.
Right.
You know, so maybe if he trained hard, he may not have been special, you know.
Yeah.
So Russell is outside of those man-made
Right.
regulations, I would say. There was a guy in Point, you know Guppy,
Yeah.
hated to train.
Right.
And everybody who saw Guppy play, the guy was fantastic on the field, but hated to train. So he would be one that would come to my mind quickly. If only he had liked to train, I mean, the sky would have been the limit for that guy. I'm almost certain he looks back with regret now
Right.
as to not having all those unrealized potential, you know.
Larry, I'm not remembering his name quite at present, but he was a left footer who came a little after the latter P era, who everybody thought that he was going to be the creative player, and he disappeared from sight. Left-footed player.
Did he play with Trinidad?
Petrotrin?
He may have played with not Keon Daniel, but he was with the national team. Left-footed player, probably remember his name. But he was the heir apparent to latter P. Didn't like to treat, yes.
Is that the boy Hardest?
Hardest.
Oh,
yeah.
Kerwin
What was his-
Jemmott.
Jemmott. Kerwin Jemmott.
Oh, yes, that's the guy. That's the
Kerwin Jemmott.
guy.
You remember them?
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
I
hardest.
thought he was the best thing that we had seen since Russell Latta.
Ah.
Before you go
Interesting you
further,
say
Doc,
that, huh?
just to reinforce what you said, he came down to Palo Seco with Queen's Park to play against United Petrotrin. Young guy, teenager.
Yeah.
And we had all our players. That young guy destroyed us.
Ah.
That's the first time I saw him.
In terms of what though? What were his attributes?
He had a dribbling ability.
Is that right?
Yeah, and he could also finish.
Yeah.
But his dribbling and to pass and effortless. I mean, effortless, as if he was in a walk in the park. When the game finished, I went up to him. I looked for him. And I said, what's your name, youngster? He said, my name is Kerwin Jemmott. And after that, every time they played, I took out the papers to see what he did. And whenever we met him, we would chat after the game, and I would talk to him and say, listen, you know, you have unlimited potential, youngster. I mean, the sky's the limit for you. And yes, I mean, well, his off-field antics and everything is
Kerwin
well
Jemmott-
documented. But
if Kerwin
definitely,
Jemmott had trained, he would have been by far
Discipline, yeah.
one of the top players
I totally
that we would be
endorse that.
talking about in
Yeah,
Trinidad.
yeah, I mean-
Instead, even I, who know a lot of players, have trouble remembering his name.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes, but give me a future star, somebody to look out for.
Unequivocally, Levi Garcia.
All right.
You know, I think Levi is going to set the place on fire. He's at a very young age, he's been immersed into a very, very good environment with a very, very good team. You know, so he is learning. At the same time, I feel, you know, in the future, Levi is going to be one of these guys that's
He's
going to
gonna
set
be
the
one,
place
yeah.
alight.
yeah, I know Levi's family well, and all his brothers are football, real top quality players also. And I agree with Tony. I think the fact that he's out there that early is a testament to his temperament and also his ability. And his age is in his favor. So, yeah, I think he has the potential to be one that can achieve what we feel his talent can bring to him.
What about you, Alvin?
There's a young fellow playing for Trinity. He's now is Hackshaw. He's another different from the Hackshaw. who
Keyshawn
Steve
Hackshaw.
He is, to me, somebody we
potential.
have to look out for. He's a sleeper. He has many more qualities than people are seeing right now. And I think he'll be professional material in no time.
All right, good. I appreciate you guys so much, man. You guys always do a good job in letting us know what to look out for. Thank you so much for being here. To my panel, you guys is done it. Or appreciate you. ACTN, thank you for giving us the opportunity. We do have a Facebook page. Check us out. And we do have an email address, fieldofdreamtt@gmail.com. You can drop us a line. Any parting words before we leave? On
Well,
anything?
wishing the national team,
Wish the national team good luck.
yep.
Well, this will air after the national team
Well,
play,
they have
but
2 games coming up, so
but-
yeah. No.
yeah, we do wish them luck. And I don't know if you guys saw the under-13 World Cup, not World Cup, sorry, the under-13 North-South, zonal North-South. We're gonna have some stars in that group of players.
Yeah.
They were
That's
excellent.
that's the
And
age
we
group we
need to say
target.
thank you to TTFA for
Yeah,
putting
that's the
that
age
on their
group we need to
grassroots program.
target.
Okay, the show is ended. Go in peace. I see you next Monday night. Good night.